The doc is in. Dr. SEC here joins us to talk everything college football with less than 2 weeks away from the college football season officially beginning. Dr. SEC joins us. You can find him. They'll be having a reboot of his channel, Your Football, The Waiting Room with Dr. SEC. His real name, Sean Littlehorn. Doc, what's going on, man? Good to have you back here with us. Been a while since you've done a little podcast like this before, huh?
Yeah, of course, seemed like a long off season, but last year I was my first year coaching college basketball, and so took a little bit of a break outside of my own stuff, and so I'm really excited to get back on, and really excited to be on here, man. I'm really excited about the great content you've been pushing out, and really been able to take a listen here lately, and you're doing a terrific job. So it's an honor to be on the one of the really up and coming podcasts out there.
Well, we appreciate that, Doc. It means a lot hearing from somebody that's been around the industry for quite a while. And let's go ahead and let's just dive into this. The AP Top 25 just came out yesterday. 9 SEC teams were featured on it. Give me your initial thoughts. I talked with a couple of guys about this yesterday. I've talked with Jesse Simonton yesterday of On 3, actually. And I've talked with a couple of other sports media personalities about their thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts initially about the first edition of the Top 25, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I think maybe like my 15th, somewhere between my 14th and 16th season of doing this, and I can't really remember a season going into where it felt like there was so much parity as there now. And a lot of that does have to do with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, obviously bringing two more kind of powerful teams into the conference. But it's not just that. I think what's really interesting here is even teams that I would say I don't necessarily think they're a top 15 team, for example, but with their schedule, I think they probably will finish in the top 15, right? So it seems like this season, what's really unique is there's a lot of parity across the board, but even the teams who have more question marks than others, they have very favorable schedules. When you look at a Missouri, a Tennessee, these teams that are kind of right there in that 15 range bubble, a lot of question marks, could potentially have a lot of exclamation marks, but their schedules fit so nicely where some of the powerhouse teams like Georgia and such really have gauntlets that they have to run through the season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this thing plays out.
Yeah, and let's just go ahead and talk about one of those teams. To me, let's start at the bottom, Texas A&M. Texas A&M comes into this year, and it's a big, big year for year one in the Mike Elko era. I think I've talked with a couple of guys. They think they're right where they are at 20. To me, I think they could move up a few spots, but around the 16 to 20 range is where I expected them to be. When I look at this A&M roster, I think it's underwhelmingly underrated when it comes to the SEC. You've got a quarterback in Connor Weigman that's going to be returning from injury, but he is one of the SEC's most underrated quarterbacks. And I've said that over and over and over again. And I'm going to continue to say it because I really do believe that this guy is severely underrated when it comes to his passing accuracy, his presence outside the pocket. This guy can move too. You saw what he did against LSU in the last game of the regular season in crunch time against a top 5 team. And he really just burned them all game long and was one of the key reasons why Texas A&M finished out that last game with Jimbo Fisher and really helped him save his job for another year. Now, that all changed the very next year. But regardless, I mean, this is a guy that when you look at him, this guy has everything that you pretty much need for a typical SEC quarterback. Not to mention the fact that they've got weapons on the outside. Yes, they lost their star running back in the backfield, but you got a guy that is very capable. Le'Veon Moss split carries last year with Omar Jacobs, but this dude can play ball. I played against him whenever he was at Estruma High School coming up in Baton Rouge. When I tell you this guy has a second gear, this guy can play ball. This guy, whenever you get him outside the numbers, when you get him on GT counters outside the tackles, if everything goes well for an SEC offensive line, he can get 88 and out the gate. Powerful out of the backfield, has an explosive first step. And when you get him into a gear, this guy could be one of the best running backs in all of the SEC. The interior is interesting as well. When you've got two of the best in Shamar Stewart and Nick Skouerton, Skouerton's going to have another big year after putting up, 10 sacks last year as a 6'4", 6'5", 290-pound specimen that should be absorbing double teams on a daily basis at the interior. That's impressive that he gets 10 sacks in the Big Ten. That's known for some great offensive lines like Michigan's, like Ohio State's, like Penn State's, and he really just destroyed that entire season. So I wanted to get some more of your thoughts about Texas A&M at 20 in that position, and where do you think that they could be at the end of the season?
Yeah, I think you've said a lot of truth right there. I think, first of all, we're supposed to start every season with a clean slate because, we hear these coaches all the time. Last year's team is not this year's team. And college football is so hard to gauge. Just years ago, when I first started this thing, preseason was really hard to gauge because it's so hard to determine how much growth a 19 to 20-year-old or 20 to 21-year-old or 21 to 22, like those are big differences. And it was always hard to gauge that. And then, after we kind of moved to from that perspective, the addition of the transfer portal and what that's meant, both transferring out and transferring in, it's really hard to gauge how these guys are going to fit into a new system, how they're going to do that. But even though we're supposed to start over every year, we still have tendencies in our mind that we remember. And I'm just kind of that guy that I will never rank Texas A&M until they prove me different, higher than 15 to 20. Like that's the range. Like, because every year I kind of think, okay, this is going to be the year. They got the tools. And then every year they're mostly always competitive. They're in the games. They're right there. And then they lose them, right? But I think what you're saying about this team that is so true, that I think 20 is the perfect spot for them. I think they're a team that could climb up to that top 15, top 10 area, because I think they're a lot more physical than people want to give them credit for. I think this is a ball team on both sides of the ball that can line up and be a whole lot more physical than people think that they can be. And there's something to be said. We look and we talk about, I think we're underestimating the talent they have because they had all those recruits come in and then we saw all of them go out. But what we forgot is that they did a pretty good job of reloading with other guys coming in, like you just said, along the defensive line, things of that nature. So I'm looking at this team, in particular, the three areas you mentioned that I think they're not getting enough credit. Number one is the quarterback position. I think this is a quarterback who is going to see his stock go off the charts this year if he stays healthy. Like, this is a guy, like you said, that when you look and say, what's the major flaw in his game, it's hard to really find one. Like, this is a guy he's really good across the board. I think at running back, they're a lot better than people think they're going to be. You're talking about a guy that he can, as you mentioned, he can run between the tackles. He can get outside the tackles. He can do so many things well. And I think there's a toughness on this defensive line and even on that offensive line that people are underestimating. So this is a team, when I look at their schedule, I look and say, with the uncertainties at Alabama, with a new coaching staff, and the things that are going on across these other teams, the difficult of their schedules and all of this is a team that I really, in my heart, I think is going to finally kind of get that 10, 11 wins that they've been kind of lacking. They've been kind of getting real close and not getting to. I think that's kind of the place I expect them to get to this season. I think 20 is the perfect spot for them, though. I wouldn't be surprised if, Jimbo had really lost. We haven't really seen Jimbo outside of that COVID year. We haven't seen Jimbo really keep the momentum of the team through a whole season since about 3 years before he left Florida State. I mean, it's kind of been just an up and down roller coaster year in and year out. Outside of that COVID season, it's kind of been a roller coaster. So that's what I'm looking at is more. I think they have all the tools mentally and culturally, in the culture. Do they have what it takes to take that next step? That I don't know, but I do think they're right there in that top 20 range. I think it's a good spot for them.
Yeah, and you look at their defensive side of the ball as well, and you get a genius on the defensive side like Elko is, and you've got a great defensive line coach as well who's been with him for just over 10 years now, who's been in the NFL, who's coached guys like that. I think he coached Kayvon Thibodeau whenever he was in his rookie year before he went back to Duke. And I mean, you could see the amount of effort that really they have been put in, and the amount of talent that, Texas A&M has just really had on the defensive side of the ball. They haven't really had a defensive line that is as good as we have seen. They could be even better than they were last year, despite losing a guy like Walter Nolan this year.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a thing that you just mentioned is the coaching they have there, having going into this season, having those guys for another spring. Like, I just think like this defensive line is going to be so physical. I think they're going to be so dynamic. They're going to be able to do so many things. And if you can cause problems in the backfield, like you, and that's what we've seen out of them, right? Like we've seen that ability to physically line up, physically go toe to toe with Alabama, go toe to toe with some of these more physical teams but most of the time kind of falter there at the end. I think they got the playmaker now at quarterback with another, with some real experience under his belt coming out of the spring, going into fall. I really feel like this is a team. If they don't hit 10 wins this year, it's time to make the move with Jimbo and just move on. It's done.
By the way, they did already fire Jimbo Fisher. They
Not
have
Jimbo.
Mike.
I'm sorry, not Jimbo.
Elko.
Elko. Sorry, Elko.
Yeah.
No, but I think this is the year that not fire, but this is the year that that they have to prove with all the money they've invested, with all the things that they've done, all the staff that they brought in. This is really the year for them to get over that and to really change that culture is what I'm trying to say. Now having in there, changing that culture to really be able to get over the top. And I think they got the guys to do it now.
Yeah, this is the year that I think Texas A&M can either do one of two things in the first year with a new head coach. You either set the standard of what's to come, or things are just going to get bad in the same trend that we're going to see since over the last 10 years that we've seen from Texas A&M, all the way back to 2013. And the biggest thing that you've seen so far is that they get off to these hot starts of the season. They'll start off 4, 5, 6-0, and then all of a sudden they'll be back in the Music City or another December 29th to 30th bowl at 8-5 on the season. And I think just the amount of missed expectations from the last couple of years with Kevin Sublin, with Jimbo Fisher. Yeah. Texas A&M is tired of it. I mean, this is a team that has been known to really evolve, and people thought that they were going to take monumental leaps forward after their first year in the SEC in 2012 with Johnny Manziel. And then since then, it's just kind of been it's been missed expectation after missed expectation. And the only real season that you really saw them really exceed expectations is in the 2020 season, when everything just went to crap all of a sudden.
Right.
So if you would really consider that a season that was successful in A&M's book, we'll see what it would have really been like if they had played an actual season. And they proved that the very next year when they lost to Appalachian State. So back to some more positives for A&M. When you look at the red zone offense, they finished ninth in the SEC last year. But when you look at the entirety of college football, that was a top 50 red zone offense.
Right.
And it's crazy to think about it, because the SEC was just unbelievable with their offensive system. When you looked at Ole Miss, when you looked at how South Carolina did last year in the red zone, and it felt like everything else just fell into piece. And it seemed like Texas A&M just got left off the back burner. Every time they were in between the 20 and the goal line, it felt like they could succeed at any point in time and they could get points. The problem is you have to establish yourself on the offensive line of the ball. And I've seen, like I mentioned already, I've seen Le'Veon Moss play. I've seen what he can do between the tackles. This is a powerful running back. And when you get him into the red zone, I mean, there's no stopping him. You're guaranteed 6 points if you get him in the backfield. So,
yeah, and that's going back with saying earlier, the shift and getting that culture back in the place that it's supposed to be. I do think that this is, I'm hearing so much coming out of. I was talking to one of my guys at Kirby day to day last night, and they really seem to be impressed with what this offensive line is going to be able to do. And it's, again, it doesn't have to be with this running back. It doesn't have to be blow them off the line 5, 6, 7 yards. You get them 3 or 4 yards, let them get ahead of steam. It's gonna be a whole different ball game. And when you increase that red zone efficiency, that's the difference in those close games. But I think it's a culture mindset down there. I was getting back to earlier. I think there's a shift, and so I'm interested to see. But I've heard the storyline before, no matter who the coach is. So as they change over from time to time, like you said, from Sumlin to Jimbo to now, it's interesting to watch and see.
It always has been, and it probably will for the rest of
you remember with Johnny, man, we thought like with Texas being down, like it felt like it was their time. And this is
Yes.
going back what I started to say earlier, and got my tongue twisted a little bit as somebody's walking behind me back here. But goes back to, we thought it was going to be that moment, and that window is so small. You got all these resources, you got all these things, and this league just got a lot tougher. So it's kind of now or never. Like if you don't get it start to make that next step to 10 wins, the 10, 11 wins this year, then you got to wonder if you're going to catch it, because everybody else is catching momentum right now too. I mean, it's really a lot of teams trending upwards right now in the SEC.
Speaking of trending upwards, let's talk about, or I should say trending at least. I don't think they're trending upwards one bit. Let's talk about the Florida Gators and the schedule that they have. 6 AP top 25 teams that they face. And I think 3 or 4 of them are top 10 currently. Florida State, I think they play Alabama. I think they play Georgia, obviously, in the cocktail party. They play Ole Miss. I mean, this is just a brutal schedule. Yeah. And everybody knows that at the end of the year, that Billy Napier will all likelihood be fired. And let me give you some history real fast, because I looked all this up way before we started. In the history of the Florida Gators, the last time that they had 3 losing seasons in a row, 1945 to 1947, after World War II. The last time that Florida had 4, 1935 to 1938. Yeah. And since 2010, at the end of the Urban Meyer era, no coach has lasted more than 4 seasons in Gainesville. The last 3, Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, all have been fired before the end of the season, of their last season. None of them resigned. None of them got a chance to coach in the bowl game. They've all had to be fired. Yeah. The same could be said for Billy Napier this year. Yeah. Now, granted, we'll see what happens at the end of this year. But let me tell you something, and Doc, I do believe that they have an opportunity to go 4-0 at the start of the season. And it's bold for me to say that, because if you look at the month of September, this is probably going to be their easiest stretch that they've had before they start really the nitty-gritty at October 12th when they go to Neyland Stadium. You get Miami at Ben Hill Griffin. They played Miami before in a must-win situation before. Remember 2018? Remember the season that they had going into year 1 of the Dan Mullen era? We weren't sure what Florida would bring out. They got the win, and it's basically set the trend for what that season would become and the very next season that would become for Florida football. And then everything just went to crap there. But if Florida, they're favored in every single one of those games according to ESPN. Florida has a very, very dynamic team. It's better than what people believe. You have a very, very elite offense. And as much as Graham Mertz checks the football down, as much as he loves to dump it out to the tight ends, dump it out into the flats, when you get him on short intermediate passes, he just lets his playmakers do his deal. Ricky Pearsall did that a lot last year. Eugene Wilson's going to do that this year. Your tight end Cunningham is going to do that this year. You have a pretty good offensive line. Defensive-wise, you lost a lot of talent there. There's no question about it. It's hard to replace that. But you've got a 400-pound specimen in the middle that's lost a good bit of weight over the last few offseasons, and that should help him clear up and play a lot more in Desmond Watson, who could be a force in the interior. So, am I being too optimistic for Florida? Or is this a scenario where this could potentially happen and it could be the start that Billy Napier needs to save his job?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you probably polled every media personality, every media person out there by each team, there's probably nobody that have a lesser approval rating than me and University of Florida fans. Like they hate me, they don't like me, and then part of that's it's because I've had a lot of fun at their expense. You know, every week I'll tweet out their record since Mullen had them the SEC championship against Alabama, and they were right there. And since then, their record, which is far below 500, you know, even the few bowl games they made it to got blown out. They've just been a pitiful specimen ever since it started going downhill then. I'm going to tell you, I'm a firm believer in Nick Saban's philosophy about culture. You know, Nick Saban, one of his favorite things he talks about in culture is he talks about it's hard within culture to build championship programs. And the reason it's hard is because you have two types of people. You got, you know, high achievers and you got mediocre people and mediocre effort people, right? And he says, you know, high achievers never like mediocre people because they're saying, why aren't they working as hard as me? And, you know, mediocre people don't like high achievers because they're doing too much. You know, it's not that serious. And he says, my responsibility as a coach is to get the right people on the bus in the right seat and to get the wrong people off the bus, right? It's about having that culture in place that is that championship culture, that championship DNA. I don't think that the coaching staff now, and I'm just going to be honest, like I don't think they're capable of that type of culture at this level in this league. I don't think the University of Florida, you know, maybe if they do get off the 4-0 start, maybe if they do get the momentum going in the right place, maybe they do begin to chop off here and there. But I look at this team, I look at their schedule, and I look at their mentality, and I've seen nothing that makes me believe that they're going to turn this program around. Because yes, they do have talent. Yes, they do have some people that you think, man, maybe they're the next step of being all SEC type players. Maybe, you know, but I tell you, at the end of the day, I don't think they have the testicular fortitude. I don't think they have the toughness about them. I don't think they have any of those things to be a championship team. And maybe this is the year that they prove me wrong. Maybe this is the year that they turn around. But I think, you know, the reason we see that great running back shift over to Georgia and bail out is for a reason. Because he knows that no matter what he does at Florida, they're going to be lucky to be a 500 football team this season. I appreciate the optimism, but I think that I think with the culture that this team has, I don't think they have the toughness. And that's hard. Like, people don't like to hear that, but I've been right a lot of years in a row about Florida for that reason. Like, it takes a certain level that I don't think they have. I don't think they have the ability to navigate this schedule. I think that they're going to be very, very fortunate or unfortunate, however you look at it, if this coaching staff is still at place at the end by the end of the season. I think by they're going to start that coaching search with at least 2 or 3 weeks left in the season. I'm just not a believer in this Florida team, and I understand you can list all of those things. The problem is they got to go against teams that all got those things and do have better culture and do have better uh, better momentum. I just don't see this Florida team doing much at all.
It's all right, Doc. The state of Texas
I
hates
mean,
me
like, I
too.
get it though. Like, eventually I have to be wrong about Florida. Like, eventually I have to. But when have we seen at Florida a coach go in there, lose it, and get it back? Right? Like, you don't see it. Like, once the wheels come off at that place, the swamp it is what it is. And it's also the most overrated stadium, by the way, in the world. Don't even like going in there. Like, I don't even like I know I'm a Gator hater apparently or whatever, but like, it even smells like urine to me when I go in that place. Like, it's just not good. And I think this football team's they're gonna see a big falter when it comes to that.
Sean, if it makes you feel any better, the state of Texas hates me for this one reason, and it's because of my article that I wrote about them. So
What was the
if it
article? I
makes you
haven't
feel
seen
any
that one.
better, so oh yeah, it's I've gotten a lot of hate on X and all over social media for it, but hey, I could be wrong too about the Longhorns in year one. So
Yeah,
we'll see
and
what
that's the thing.
happens
Like,
with.
you could be wrong, but we're right more than we're wrong, and so I don't mind beating my chest a little bit when I'm right because you're going to run me through the ringer when I'm wrong. Like, the times that I'm wrong. Like, let me tell you, the biggest miss of my life was Kirby Smart. Like, I did
Mm.
not think Georgia should. And you talk about being wrong. I literally have gone on there, and nobody has been a bigger advocate after year two of Georgia than me. Like, from year two on, like, I've been a big advocate for that program before they reached the heights that they reached. But every year I get an old freezing cold takes. They want to post the same ones where I went off on Smart in year one, saying he wasn't ready for it. I was right in year one, but ever since then I've been wrong. We're wrong some, but we're right a lot. So be ready to beat your chest or take the beating. You'll do one or the other.
Who'd you think should have been the head coach then?
Now, I don't even want to say because I was so wrong. Okay, this is the biggest miss of my career. And like I said, I have, especially when it comes to coaching staffs, I have been right, I would say 90+% of the time when it comes to coaching staff. The one huge miss I had was Georgia. I liked Tom Herman at the time, right? Like, I thought, like, this is a guy, he's on the upward trend. He was doing these things. Man, did I ever miss it on that one. And Kirby Smart, But the reasons I stated were right. Like, and that's what we go by. We go by we play the percentages, we play the numbers, we play the reality, and sometimes there's exceptions to the rule. But what is the last coordinator that came straight as a defensive coordinator, never being a head coach, and in the SEC and have success? Kirby Smart was the first one in a long, long time. He was at a program where he wasn't hardly ever allowed to talk to the media, right? Like he was suppressed. How is he going to come and run a top tier program like Georgia, where media is such a big part of it? We knew he could recruit. We knew he could coach defenses. We knew all of that. But all the things I said were true, except for Kirby Smart. He's the exception to the rule. And Texas might be this year too, but you're right. The things that you're noting as reasons are definitely reasons and concerns to have.
Yeah, and he was with Nick Saban majority of his career. He was with Georgia only 1 year before he got the head coaching gig. And I mean, you're right. I mean, when you're underneath a guy like Nick Saban that is all about discipline, that's all about, you know, just coaching, not worrying about what the media says. There's points to be made about that as well.
And we've
So
seen a lot of that Saban tree go off and do well unless it was a Power Five school. And they got in that Power Five school, and it wasn't all that. Like they were struggling. There's a lot of those guys that came and went. You know, you mentioned McElwain, you mentioned some of these guys that kind of did good out. It was all the reasons. I had all the reasons to be right, but man, was I ever wrong, boy. And I hear about it every year. I get that same. I want to delete it, but I think that's a wimpy way to go about it. Like I want to, but every year, and I'm like, you guys know that I've been the biggest supporter and proponent of Kirby Smart since year two. I admitted I was wrong several times, but I get whipped for it every year.
hey, look, Mike Locksley might be having a decent little tenure, but that might change since he lost Talia.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I agree. I agree. There's a lot of truth to that.
Dr. SEC, Sean Littlehorn, joining us here on SEC Unfiltered. Let's go ahead and give a quick sponsor to our good friends over at MyBookie.ag. They are one of the fastest growing sports books around the nation. So go on over to MyBookie.ag and use code SECU at sign up to receive a special welcome offer on your first deposit. Now, looking at some of these trends, the latest odds to win the national title, Georgia comes in as your plus 300 favorite. They're celebrating 10 years, by the way, Doc. It's a big celebration they're having. So why not just use that head code to celebrate with them? SECU.
Think about this. Yeah, that's amazing. Think about this. The last active head coach right now to beat Kirby Smart was in 2017. That was Gus Malzahn. That's how long it's been since an active coach has beat Kirby Smart at Georgia. I mean, it is phenomenal. You know, the few coaches that have got them, they're all out. The other one after that, I think it was the previous year. Yeah. So even after Gus Malzahn beat him, he beats him the next week, right, in the SEC championship game. And the year before, Hugh Freeze beat him when he was at Ole Miss, Georgia's first year. But since that, there's only like two active head coaches in all of college football that have ever beat Kirby Smart as a head coach. That's just an unbelievable stat to me.
Steve Sarkisian was one, wasn't he?
No, he was. Let's see, he wasn't because in 2006, 17 is when Texas beat. Who was the coach then?
Smart was there.
No, where was Sarkisian at 2017?
Sark might have still been at Bama.
Yeah. He went there after that. So he wasn't a head coach at the time. Yeah. So the last active head coach to beat them. Of course, they haven't lost a lot of games, right? They lost to Nick Saban. They lost some games to. He lost some games to. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. LSU down at LSU.
Brian Kelly.
No, before him. Sorry.
Orgeron, Miles.
Orgeron beat him, but he's gone. He's no longer a head coach, right? Like, so the guys that actually beat him are no longer head coaches. So it's kind of interesting.
I think Kiffin's going to be the only one that has a legitimate chance.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's wild when you think about what Georgia's doing down there. And I mean, I look at him this year, and I do think there are some areas so you look at the quarterback position. I mean, Carson Beck is an amazing quarterback, and he's got so. I mean, I think this is the deepest running back unit they've had since Chubb and Sony Michel were there. This running
he has
back
the second best odds to win the Heisman too, according to MyBookie.
Yeah, They lost some receivers, but they've always been by committee, and they went out and got two really good receivers from Miami and Vanderbilt. They're going to fix the spot. Losing RHOBACK does hurt because I think that X position is the position they're the thinnest at. It's the one that's going to be like to really take a look at. I mean, they're loaded at tight ends. They had two really, really good tight ends. Even, they lost maybe the greatest tight end to ever play the game. They got two amazing ones. They then got the Sanford transfer to come in. But if Carson Beck was to go down for any reason, knock on wood, God forbid, whatever you want to say, if he was to go down, Gunnar Stockton, I don't think is ready for that move. So that, they got to keep him healthy. But man, this Georgia program's good. Like, I mean, they are loaded this season. I think this running back and I think this secondary is going to be unbelievable this year. They've got 4 of those spots back there already locked up. Who's going to be in there? And that, what they got coming in, freshmen, other guys, this is going to be an amazing. It should be now, schedule's crazy, right? The schedule's crazy. I think Alabama and Auburn are back to back. They got to go to Oklahoma. They got to go to Texas. They got all of that. But at the end of the day, this football team, if they stay healthy, they're going to be unbelievable.
So you mentioned about assistant coaches earlier and all about the ones that couldn't beat Kirby Smart just yet. Let's talk about some more assistant coaches that could be head coaches in 2025. So I've narrowed it down to 3. And I got Blake Baker, Kirby Moore, and Glenn Schumann. I think those are the top 3 candidates who will be head coaches. If not in 25, maybe in 26 as well. And so here's the guys.
I think you're right. Go ahead,
so guys that they could replace. Obviously, everybody talks about the hot seat this year. I don't think Shane Beamer's on it just yet, just because he's got a young roster in South Carolina. But here's the 3. We've already mentioned about Billy Napier. All right. Clark Lee, of course. I mean, Vanderbilt's just been terrible. They've been terrible for the last 15, 20 years. Since the 21st, they've always been terrible. And, of course, everybody knows about Sam Pittman. Let me ask you this, Sean. Who are these assistant coaches that could replace those 3? Maybe not in this upcoming year, maybe not in the SEC to replace them, but who else outside of the SEC could potentially replace those other than the 3 names that I just mentioned?
Well, I can't go outside of the one you just mentioned. I got to go with Glenn, number 1, because what Kirby Smart has proven, and he came out from underneath Saban, and I think the thing that I underestimated him about as well is he didn't just take the Saban system, but he put his own appeal and approach and way of doing some of those same processes that he did there. I think that when you look at this, you've got to understand that these guys that are coming out of this Georgia system, they know how to build programs. I mean, you look what's happening in Oregon. This is a program that, yes, it's got a lot of resources. Yes, it's already in a good place, but people are pretty high on them right now. They're preseason number 3. Dan Lanning's just doing a fantastic down there. I think Glenn is one of those guys that's anywhere he goes is going to build a program. And what I find interesting is the one job that I think, he's not just going to take a job. He's not going to go to Arkansas. Right? Like Arkansas has a glass ceiling that it's really hard to bust through. He's not going to go to Vanderbilt. That Florida Gators job is a job that a guy like Glenn might go to and do really, really well because he knows how to recruit. He knows how to, just do to build programs. And so that's one I would really look out for. And then when you go across the board, I know it's unlikely. Because he's left, he's happy, he's red and black all the way through. But another guy I think people are going to start looking at is Mike Bobo again, because Mike Bobo had some health issues, right? There were some things that were going on with Mike Bobo that were much more than on the field. Mike Bobo coming into the season, that hire, there wasn't but about a 20% maybe of Georgia fans who are very happy about that hire. But I'm going to tell you something. Mike Bobo did a fantastic job of growing, not just his year there as a an analyst rather, the things he did. He did such a great job of taking the things that he already did, adding the things he learned, in the great system that was being ran there at Georgia prior to his re-arrival. I'm going to tell you, like, if the right job came and somebody could pull Mike Bobo, like, I think he's really, really grown as being under, again, he was under Mark Richt, and nobody appreciates and loves Mark Richt more than I do. His first 5 years at Georgia were unbelievable. Um, but when you look at the reality of what of what Kirby Smart does, and now having Mike Bobo attaching to that, like I don't know if this next year's the year if he's going to do it again, and I don't know if he would because he loves Georgia and he's paid pretty well. But that next year, if I'm Arkansas, if I'm one of these, even a Florida, like Mike Bobo is a guy I want because man, that guy can recruit the South. He's proven that he's developed. He's moved past, some of the stuck in the mud ways he had as an offensive coordinator in the past, kind of that Mark Richt system. You knew every time they were going to run, every time it was 3rd and 15, they were going to run a running back screen. Like every time, like you knew it ahead of time, right? Like I've seen Bobo grow and develop so much and so greatly under the not just Smart, but that whole staff there, like how they run things. He's the guy I would go for. Um, and I tell you, when you look across again, when you look across in particular, you look across the SEC, you look at a lot of these coaches coming in, and which ones are willing to be patient, which ones are willing. There's actually, man, if I had to pick one, there's a couple guys on that Missouri staff I really, really like. A lot of coaches, a couple coaches on that Missouri staff, I really, really like what they're doing over there, the things that they're developing, the things that they're going through. But if I had to like just, you're gonna make me just pick one more. If I had to pick just one more, um, I think when you look, I wish I could go a head coach swatching jobs, but if I looked at one assistant that I'm really, really big on, and that I really think can kind of catapult to that next level, is there at LSU. Um, oh my
Baker?
gosh, yes. Like, did you say him already?
Yeah, I mentioned Blake
Oh, my
Baker could
bad.
be
We're just
one.
taking it light. You said it quick. I didn't hear Baker the first one,
You're good.
but Baker. No, Baker is a guy. Like I think Baker is a guy that I think that really can go into a program. He knows how to do all the things you want to build a program, and you're always a little nervous with assistant. You got to be nervous with assistant coaches, right? You got to be nervous with coordinators. But he's the guy I felt that's built different, and he's coming up under guys like I'm really like I don't I think Brian Kelly is one of the most underrated coaches for his career that there is. I know a lot of people don't like him, but like what he did under resource at Notre Dame, he's coming to the league right now. We're going to see what he does this year. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road, but I think that coming up under some of the things that he does, some of the way that he does it, if you can take what Baker already has, add in that recruiting element, that ability to hit the South a little bit harder, a little bit better. I like him as if I had to choose as another assistant.
The great thing about Blake Baker is that he's from Houston. He's been around the state of Louisiana for a while. He played at Tulane
Mm-hmm.
um, his college career. The farthest he's ever gone is Missouri, and he's still
Yeah.
been around the South. Majority of his career was in Miami for a while as a defensive coordinator. This isn't his first rodeo at LSU. He was a linebackers coach during his lone season
Yeah.
with Ed Orgeron after he got tossed out, and then he goes to Missouri, and then look at the wonders that he does there with that defense. Really improves to them. And now he's just one of the best young head coaches. This is a guy that wears cleats to practice, Doc. When
Yeah.
you look at him on the practice squad, I mean, this dude is just like one of the guys. He
Right.
has the mindset of a strength and conditioning coach and has the heart of just, he knows how to coach defense. He knows how to work with backers. He knows how to work with guys like Harold Perkins, like Greg Penn, like Whit Weeks. And he can make those guys into so much more than what they were last year, as one-dimensional as they were. He can
You
help
know,
create a secondary that is much better. He can create all SEC guys that are
yeah.
considered semi-mediocre whenever they're coming out of high school or coming out of the transfer portal. Just look at what he did with Chris Abrams-Drain last year. I mean, that's just one example, and there's many more that's about to come for Blake Baker as the year goes on. And you also mentioned about Glenn Schumann. Glenn Schumann is about an hour 45 away from Gainesville right now. That's his hometown in Valdosta. So
Yeah.
it's not that far for him. It's you can literally just take a little drive, go through Tallahassee a little bit, and then he's right there. I mean,
Yeah.
he's basically been around the state of Florida. He was around during the swamp, what was that Netflix documentary, Swamp Kings?
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to bring back the Swamp Kings mentality back to Florida, dude. I know you don't like the state. I know the state of Florida hates you, but I mean, you got to be realistic. They need that
Yeah.
mentality back.
No, that's what I'm going to. Like, that's the one guy. Like, if I'm them, he's the like I'm going after him because no, we're to the point now. We have to be. The money is so big now at these bigger. Like, you're not really going to outbid for coaches much. As there's not a if you got a great coach in a great situation, and he's making 7 or 8 million. 9.5 million ain't gonna make that much of a difference, right? Like when you're that close, like you're making that much money in a good situation, you ain't just gonna. So you got to look up who's that next guy, right? Like who's that guy that can come in and give us the mentality we need. I really feel like with Glenn and go back the same way. Like I feel like those are guys. Like if you bring them in, your guys are going to be mentally, physically tough. And the one thing that both of those guys do is they are great evaluators of talent. Everybody looks at Georgia or especially Georgia and they say, oh, they got all these 5. Man, some of their best players have been 3 stars, like Jordan Davis and some of these guys that Schumann had identified, hey, found, man, if you see Georgia sign a 3-star, go ahead and mark it down. That guy's going to be good. And when they walk, both of those coaches, when they walk in the room, I know a lot of high school coaches in that area, they have those coaches respect because they develop players. They develop players. You look at LSU and how much some of those guys improved last year on the defensive side of the football in particular. Like we were thinking like this was going to be the disaster, some of those positions. And those guys, although they want to get better, they improved. They got better at a lot of positions and they know how to develop, they know how to recruit. And those are the two big things that those programs need right now, especially if you're not the top tier team, especially with NIL. If you don't have all the NIL money in the world that you have to go against now, those are the two guys that I would go after real quick.
Here's another guy that could be interesting. How about Steve Wilkes, the former defensive coordinator at Missouri? Now, I know he got fired following what happened in the Super Bowl, but I mean, this is a guy that's been around the league for the last 25 plus years.
Right.
He is really good. He's been around the NFL, although the only problem I will say is that he's only been he's been a one-time head coach, and that was in the NFL. He's never been a college coach before. That's the only knock I really have on him. But I do think if Steve Wilkes were to make a return to college football, it would be in the SEC. Now, which team? We don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. I do think there is, it's changed though. Like I think the NFL part helps you a little bit in today's game where it really has become a free agency. It really has become like some of these things. But I think, and again, I think he's a coach. I know most coaches are like this, or almost all of them, but it has to be the right fit. Like it has to be just the right fit for it to work. But you get him in the right fit. I would love to see Pittman turn around. I love Pittman, but I think Arkansas is a place where a guy like that can go in with that defensive toughness, that hog mentality, and could find a little bit more success. And I'm really, I'm cheering for some of these guys, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the only time he's really been around a team like that, been around the state of Arkansas, really just he's been around the South Carolina area, he's been around the Missouri area.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's really about it.
But
But
he's gonna have to hire the right coaches, right? Like he's gonna
yes,
have to hire those coaches that can go into those schools that have that rapport, that can build. But I think with what's so important at a place like Arkansas and these schools in particular, like Arkansas always comes to mind for me, is like you have to be able to develop. Like you are not going to get 5 stars in this recruiting class. Like you have to be a person that can go in, identify 3 stars that have potential to be 4 and 5 stars, and you have to find those guys and develop them. I think really of all those defensive coaches we just mentioned, like they all three have that ability to develop, to go in. But you got to give it like a Schumann in particular, like his ability to recruit gives him a notch up. But I love that fit if it's in. He's the kind of guy I want to get at a place like Arkansas because he's got to knock it out of the park on the coordinators because those guys are not the coordinators but the assistant coaches in general. Those are the guys that are in the high schools the most, and he's got to be he's got to get those right.
Last question before we let you go, Doc. It's been an awesome conversation with you. Heisman odds, according to our good friends at MyBookie, Dylan Gabriel so far is the favorite. He may win the Heisman Trophy. He could be the next Marcus Mariota, as we know. Carson, followed by Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Will Howard, Nico Iamaleava, Garrett Nussmeier, Cameron Ward, Riley Leonard, Connor Weigman, Avery Johnson, Jackson Arnold, and Brady Cook. I'm kind of surprised about the Avery Johnson one over guys like Brady Cook and Jalen Daniels and DJ Uiagalelei. But according to you, who is winning the Heisman Trophy this year?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be honest. And it's weird saying it at this position at this school, but I think this is the year that Georgia gets a Heisman Trophy winner. I really, really do, because the schedule that they have, I know that it's difficult. Like you got to go to University of Alabama very early, right? And then but I look at some of these, like Alabama's a perfect example. Like, so this new defensive system that they're going to be running at Alabama, you know, um, it's a really good system, but typically it struggles against one really, a lot of different kind of power rushes, things like that. But the really thing you can really get this defense and this nickel type defense to really expose it is two tight end sets, right? Two tight end sets really take off. And if you're Alabama and you're going against Georgia, the last thing you want to do is have a problem covering tight ends because they got three of them that are going to probably play on Sundays, at least three of them that are probably going to play on Sundays coming up. And so I love Georgia against Alabama this year because of that matchup. The last team, a very similar defense that played against them in that style that really comes to mind was TCU in the national championship game. And TCU was not as bad as they looked against Georgia. It's just they were the worst possible defense you could run against that Georgia team because they were a perfect match for it. What Georgia has at running back and the schemes that they can run on top of the two tight end sets, I look at like them being able to go in and just I love what Georgia has at wide receiver, and I love what they have at running back, both catching and running the football, that is going to allow them to take pressure off. I think this is the year that Georgia gets over that hump and and Carson Beck wins the Heisman Trophy this year. I never thought I'd say a quarterback at Georgia was going to win the Heisman Trophy, because it was always a running back school, whether it was Walker or it was Nick Chubb or it was, whoever it was down those lines. It was RBU for a while there, but I like Carson Beck to do it. I love he's going to have so many games on the big stage. You even look at, Tennessee, and you got Tennessee at home this year, right? Like Tennessee is one, like, I know I got to shut up. We got to move on. But Tennessee is one that I'm looking at where they're ranked, and I'm saying to me, that's like they have some big question marks that might become exclamation marks, particularly at quarterback, those things that might really go over. But I look at them, I'm like, are you really a top 15 team? But you look at their schedule and you say, yeah, you're probably going to finish in the top 15 because, under this coaching staff, you've been really, really good at home and on neutral fields. I think they're like 21-4 his whole tenure. They don't have a lot of road games again this year, but I think they're 4-6 on the road on true road games. They're like 4-6, and their offense is always pretty much anemic on the road. You look last year, I think one time, against Kentucky is the only time they scored 21 or more on the road last year. The year before that, they're okay. The year before that, they averaged like 20-something points less on the road than they did at home. But this year, who do they got? I'm trying to remember. I know it's like Arkansas. If they got Georgia, that's an L for them. That offense does not move against Georgia.
Just
and
depends
it's
on how
what.
their defense does too.
Yeah, I want to say Oklahoma, right? I think make Oklahoma.
Yes, they play Oklahoma. I think the last week of September, the first week of October.
Yeah, so if they hold set at home like they usually do, and they only lose to maybe Georgia on the road or maybe even two games, like they're going to probably finish in that top 15 is my point. But that's a team I look at Carson Beck and I think he's going to put up some big numbers against them no matter what they tell you. So like it's going to be really interesting to watch. I think Carson Beck, if he stays healthy, he's going to go. You remember those first few games, like Carson Beck, the guy, like I even was like, he looked like a guy that didn't believe in himself those first few games of the season. And then they kind of gave him a little, and then all of a sudden this guy just took off, right? Like he just played amazing for the better part of most of the season. He's going this season with so much confidence, so much hard work. Everything I'm hearing out of camp is that he's been amazing outside of one scrimmage game, threw a couple picks. I think he breaks every single season record for Georgia this year. I think it's just going to be a big year. What they got at receiver, people just don't realize. They got like 7 guys that are going to be really, really good.
Yeah, and I've talked with some insiders at Georgia, and they say that he's got an opportunity to have a Joe Burrow type of season. So that's saying quite a lot.
I think that's what we're going to see. I think that's what we're going to see. And that depth at running back. Remember last year at running back, they had Deion Bell, who's going to be a starting receiver this year for them, and was great at wide receiver once they were able to move. This is their running back a lot of last year to start off the season. So now, now they've got, both the Robinsons back, they got, just amazing. Well, of course, he's going to be suspended the first game, against Clemson. But what they're going to have at running back is going to take so much pressure. What do you pick your poison? Like this team is complete, and that offensive line is going to be something special as well. It's just going to be a great year for that Georgia offense.
Georgia is the 14-point favorite going up against the Clemson Tigers. The over-under for the game is 48. You think they break the over, or is it going under? This is going to be a defensive ball game.
Yeah, I think that if it holds serve to what we typically seen, is that they're going to come in a little probably. Well, they may not, right? But I feel like they tend to come to these games a little bit more conservative, knowing that we're better than you. And so we're just going to line up in that first half. It's going to kind of be close, and then we're just going to pull away about halfway through that third. I expect that. What did you say the over-under is?
48.
I think the over goes over that, but I do think that it doesn't. It looks like it's not going to go over that the first 2.5 quarters of the game. I look at Georgia from halfway through the third to halfway through the fourth to really just pull away in this ball game.
Do they cover?
I think they do. I think that this is a team that's going to physically whip you at the end of games. I think that this game's really close, probably 10 points with 7-8 minutes. But I think that Kirby probably ain't going to pull off the gas there at the end like he does a lot of times, only because he knows he might have 1 or 2 losses if things don't go right this year, and he needs to make the playoffs, and he needs this to be a big win out of conference. So I think they cover. I think a lot of times Kirby Smart pulls back like he don't care. He's like, we win and we're in. It's a little tougher this year with the schedule you got. So I think he ends up putting it up, and I think they probably win by 17, maybe 20 points by the end of it.
Yeah, this is going to be a defensive ball game at the start, no doubt about that. Clemson comes in and they got a very underrated defense in the ACC, but their offense just has not had that spark yet with Cade Klubnik, like they thought they were going to have a couple years back, and it's been proven so far during the ACC play. But like you mentioned already, it's going to get off to a slow start, and then Carson Beck's going to find his rhythm. Yeah, and like you mentioned already, ever since that Ole Miss game last year, he's just been on a different level of elite. And that's why he's been a Heisman Trophy contender going into this season. That's why he and Jalen Milroe, I think the winner of that game might be winning the Heisman Trophy this year.
Yeah. Alabama might surprise me. I think they're going to be really good. I just don't think they're going to have I think they're a bad, for the first time where it's been like a bad matchup for Georgia going against Saban. Like it's just, there were some matchup areas. It wasn't talent. Like I think some good Georgia teams lost to lesser talented Alabama teams over the last couple of years. But I think this year it's a bad matchup. That defense versus this offense is not going to be a good matchup. I think that I do like Milroe. I like what he can do, but I just think that Georgia's going to pull away in this one toward the end. We'll see. This is a great we'll see how great the staff is. I think they're really, really good. But I just think Georgia's just a bad matchup for that defense.
Dr. SEC joining us here on SEC Unfiltered. Doc, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. Tell us a little bit about the reboot on Roku. I know we briefly mentioned it before we started recording, man, and kind of been on and off a little bit back in the media, but it is great to have you back on. And it's great to hear you, and more to come from you. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have on Roku, Amazon, Apple, particularly Roku's our biggest one. We have over 500,000 subscribers on our Roku channel. There was a changeover in Roku where we had to do a different, so it's a whole coding direct publisher type thing, but there was a change. We've been in the process of building that. We got some amazing content that's getting ready to come out in the next week. It's actually 8 days from today is the launch of the new channel. And so just search in your Roku, your Amazon, your Apple for Dr. SEC, and it'll come up right there. And there's gonna be a lot of great content this coming year.
Doc, it's been a pleasure having you on SEC Unfiltered. Let us know where we can find you on all your social medias: X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever you have, my man.
Yeah, it's across the board. It's THEDRSEC, the Dr. SEC. And we've also 2 weeks we got a new website launching. You can go to secfootball.tv. So we got a new website launching there as well.
Doc, it's been a pleasure having you on, my man. Well, hopefully, let's have a great start to the college football season, and hope you enjoy the rest of the basketball camp, my man.
Yeah, we will, and I appreciate being on the show, and we'll do it again real soon.